that undoubtedly could resonate with the rural communities who he worked with, using the simple imagery drawn from their lived experiences. Jesus challenged their conception of community belonging and power. John 10:11 through 18. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lies down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. Jesus goes on to say, I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I lay my life down for my sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this flock. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father.
Would you be with me in prayer? Spirit of the living God, our good shepherd, you lead us in the ways of righteousness, justice, peace, and love. Send your Spirit upon us afresh this day. Open our hearts and our minds. Lead us again today. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. You know, if I didn't know Jesus better, I wouldn't really like what he says there at the beginning, the way he talks about the hired hands running away. It sort of sounds like he's saying it's hard to find good help these days, or people just don't want to work, or one of those other things that people say from time to time that gets me really mad. Like maybe he doesn't recognize maybe the shepherds left because the conditions were undoubtedly bad, right? Jesus calls himself the Good Shepherd, though. I know that that isn't what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't complaining about the workers, the hired hands, but he calls himself the Good Shepherd. And one of the primary marks of being a good shepherd is being willing to protect the sheep, even being willing to go into very dangerous situations for the sake of the flock. Lions and tigers and bears. Shepherds were expected to fiercely defend their sheep from any and all predators who came their way. Jesus draws a distinction in this passage between the person who is hired just to tend the sheep and the person who truly loves and cares for the sheep. The real shepherd has to love the sheep. They're not simply doing a job. They are taking on an identity, a relationship, a way of life. The connection between the shepherd and the flock is not like the relationship we're called to have with our jobs or our bosses. Shepherds don't clock in and clock out. They live in the fields with their flocks. Night and day, rain and shine, shepherds are there with the sheep, come whatever, wolves or bears. Someone hired to do a job doesn't have that same kind of commitment. Someone hired to do a job shouldn't have that kind of commitment, I would argue. There's this idea that people should be grateful for their jobs, so grateful that they are willing to endure unjust treatment and low wages. Many of us are fed that idea that we should feel lucky to have a job. As we gather today to celebrate the work we do at the Spokane Alliance, we remind one another that our bosses, the companies, corporations that many of us work for, need us far more than we need them. When we join together, refuse to have our coalitions fractured, we are powerful enough to demand just treatment, to remind people with political and economic power that there are far more of us than there are of them. But Jesus isn't talking about shepherds hired to protect someone else's livestock. He's not making a critique of labor here. Jesus is talking about shepherds who tend the sheep that are theirs, who they love, the sheep they are in relationship with, the ones who know the sound of their voice. I get excited about the work that we do with the Spokane Alliance because it pushes me to see the world more like that. I don't own the world. I don't own Spokane. On my own, sometimes I feel like a hired hand, punching in, going through the motions, and feeling like there is very little I can do to truly improve the world. Not at my job, of course, but in the grander scheme of things. But when I'm in a room full of people who are invested in their communities, who refuse to accept unacceptable conditions and outcomes for people, I feel a sense of power. I feel invested in working for change because I can see that collectively we actually do own Spokane. We actually do own the world. We belong to the world. Broad-based organizing, like we do at the Spokane Alliance, reveals something true, I believe, about who we actually are and how we are called to be. We aren't simply individual workers, hired to perform our own little parts so that the world can continue to operate smoothly and profitably for its owners. We are called to be the ones who own the world. We are the ones who live here, who drink the water, breathe the air, walk on the land. That gives us a stake in what happens here. And like the shepherd who tends the flock that is their own, we are called to work powerfully for justice, to protect those who are endangered, not simply because we want a paycheck, although we do want paychecks, but because we love our communities. We are truly invested in our communities, not to make a profit, but to see a world in which our common dreams can flourish. Our faith calls us to have that kind of love for the world, love that values life and community for their own sake, not simply because they are profitable. There's a great lie out there told by people hungry for more and more power and control. The lie is that this world belongs to them, that the rest of us are simply hired hands. The lie is that we should keep quiet, follow the rules, and do our jobs. The lie is that we should be happy with whatever little bit they are willing to give us because we do not really deserve anything. The lie is that people who demand more or dare to dream of more are selfish, lazy, entitled. The truth is we are called to own the world, not as Christians, not just as humans, certainly not as Americans, but collectively, with the entirety of this planet, the entire community of life. We are called to hold it and to care for it, to be invested in its future, to recognize that there is no clocking out of this work. This is our home. It's our only home. We are not guests here, and there is nowhere else we can go. The work we do at the Spokane Alliance reflects that truth. The work we do to deepen the relationships both within and across our various communities is the work of taking ownership, collectively, of our communities, of this world, and our shared future. It is the work of truly loving one another in this world and using our power to demand justice for all. I am extremely grateful for that work. I'm grateful for the opportunities we have to join in that work. I'm grateful to Laurel and Emma for being here to raise their voices from the Spokane Alliance today to teach us a little bit more about specifically how we do this work, practically how we do this work, and why it matters. So I hope you will join me in giving them both a warm welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Bob. Good morning. Thank you for inviting us here today. My name is Laurel Fish, and I am the senior organizer for the Spokane Alliance. We are a broad-based coalition alliance of over 30 institutions, faith congregations, labor unions, nonprofit organizations. And for the past 2 years, I have had the privilege of walking in the footsteps of some incredible organizers and leaders who helped build this organization, including many, many members of Westminster, which was, as Pastor Bob said, one of the founding member institutions. And as I sat here this morning, I've been writing down all of these notes because it's like this is, I say, I've been trying to think, what do I have to offer this conversation? And I think that it is, what you all talked about this morning are some incredibly valuable, powerful ideals. Our role as community organizers is to help this congregation and others bring those ideals into public life, outside the walls of this building. And one of the ways that we do that is to get more comfortable with power. When people ask me what we do at the Spokane Alliance, I say that we are a power-building organization. And that you might say, ugh, I don't know how I feel about power. I've had, you might think that it does carry some negative connotations. Because we've all experienced instances where power has been used against us. We've all experienced bad bosses and overbearing parents and some unchecked police officers, right? We all have experiences of what we call unilateral power, top-down power. But what organizing teaches us is that the type of power that we are working towards is not about dominance, it's about the ability to act. The word power comes from the Latin word posse, or to be able to. This is where poder in Spanish comes from. Yo puedo, I can. In organizing, power is a verb. It's not an object that we have or don't have. It's something that we do. It depends on our everyday actions. And the other thing that comes to mind when I think about power, right, is it's not, we've all heard the quote about power, absolute power corrupting absolutely. It is also impotence and a sense of powerlessness that corrupts. When I think about the reasons that I want to build power, I reflect on moments of powerlessness in my own life. The most salient one right now is that right before Christmas this last year, my husband was diagnosed with brain cancer, right before his 40th birthday. And all of a sudden, I have been thrust into a whirlwind of managing his care and his appointments, scheduling appointments, managing medications, plus juggling the responsibilities of caring for two young kids. And it has caused a lot of personal pain in my life. It has also made me feel the pain of others and the preventable tragedies in our community in a very different way. Because the same week that we went to Seattle for brain surgery, Spokane experienced a week of freezing temperatures back in January. And if someone was outside that week without a place to stay, they were at risk of dying, not because they had some terrible diagnosis, but simply because they did not have a place to stay warm. And while there is a sense of pain and tragedy in my own situation, the sense of impotence when it comes to the preventable tragedies going on in our community, that is the anger that fuels my organizing. Because there is a tremendous amount of pain in this world that I can't do much about, but there is also, organizing teaches us to identify and then act on the preventable suffering in our community. And I'm guessing that if you all took a minute to think about what the pressures in Westminster, either in your life, in your family's life, or right outside the walls of this building, there would be some things that you don't have enough power to act on alone. And that is what community organizing teaches us to identify and act on. I would guess that Westminster is a member of the Spokane Alliance because you all recognize that if our institutions care about love and justice, we also need to care and be interested in having enough power to compel that justice. I'm going to talk about one recent example of this, is our 5-year campaign to create and protect our local housing levy funds. Back in 2019, neighbors who attended the weekly meal ministry at the West Central Abbey identified housing as their top concern. These mostly folks who were low income, who are coming every Wednesday for a weekly meal. And instead of just getting angry and protesting, they researched and worked with our city officials and came to City Council with a solution. With the support of the Spokane Alliance, our city adopted HB 1590, which is a special levy that generates about $6 million a year for building new units of affordable housing and providing housing-related services that people need in order to thrive. And it's not a complete solution, right? $6 million a year isn't enough, but it is a crucial step towards filling the gaps left by other funding sources. And it allows us to build hundreds of new affordable homes, or it should allow us to build hundreds of new affordable homes. And in the midst of a housing crisis, every new home is part of the solution. So for the since 2020, all of us in Spokane have been paying 0.1% in our sales tax for the housing levy. We thought we had won when this policy passed. And then the mayor's budget came out in 2022 and proposed raiding that housing levy fund that we all pay into in order to pay for the TRAC shelter, the Trent Resource and Assistance Center, which I would say is a misnomer, does not provide much assistance or resources. So we turned out to City Hall during the budget hearings to ask them to address the long-term housing needs of our community, not just Band-Aid solutions. And they said, okay, we won't put this money towards TRAC. And then last year, and we thought we had won, and then last year, the city, once again, during the budget hearings, the city said, oh great, we have this money available, we're going to use it to fill other holes in our budget. And once again, the Spokane Alliance and our member institutions and leaders stood firm, and we went to City Council, and we said, no, that's not what this money was for. And we also said, we aren't gonna make this our new holiday tradition of going back every year and telling you no. We are going to ask for a meeting in the new year with a new council and a new mayor to come up with some better solutions, a better process. So that leaves us with where we are now. There is $14.5 million in the housing levy fund. None of it, some of it has gone out, not very much, and none of it has gone through a public process, the public process that the law actually created and demands. We also have an opportunity now, because we have a new mayor and new city council members. We think that we have an opportunity to create some public accountability and transparency. And so we have invited Mayor Brown to have a public conversation with us, with the Spokane Alliance member institutions, on Thursday, May 2nd, less than 2 weeks away, so that we can start to have a conversation about what the long-term solutions are and what commitment we would like to see from her going forward. So I'm going to pause here for a minute. You actually get to see you got to have a preview of what May 2nd is going to look like. Emma is a member of the Health Equity Circle and is one of the people who's going to share her testimony with the mayor at our upcoming assembly. So I'm going to let Emma share more about that.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting us into your congregation this morning. It's really an honor to be here. Like Laurel said, my name is Emma Cremine. I am a medical student at the University of Washington. Go dogs. Any dogs in the house? Okay, all right. I'm also a leader of Washington Students for Community Health. My classmates and I have been spearheading a program for medical students to accompany community health workers at the Trent Resource and Assistance Center, also known as TRAC, the largest homeless shelter in Spokane. It's about 300 beds. There's no running water. They use outhouses out back. Yeah. So over the past 6 months of volunteering at TRAC, we've been helping people with social needs such as signing up for EBT cards or food stamps, getting Provider One cards, getting enrolled in Medicaid, as well as scheduling specialist healthcare appointments, because as you may or may not know, a lot of people don't have phones when they're living in a 300-person shelter. And the other thing we do is we simply listen to them recount the trials and tribulations that come with being unhoused. Recently, I spoke with a resident, who I'm going to call Johnny. She's a wheelchair-bound mom who is staying at the TRAC shelter with her son for the last few months. A couple weeks ago, at the beginning of April, she did not receive her Social Security check and set out to remediate the problem. For most of us, a trip to the DMV or other government building, that's an irritating task. For someone with a physical disability living at TRAC, it is next to impossible. Johnny's journey entailed busing from TRAC to the Social Security office, to the Department of Social and Human Services, and then back to TRAC. So to put this into perspective, I put it into Google Maps. I think we all are familiar with that. That trip, round trip, that took 6 bus transfers and walking 1.9 miles on foot, or in Bobby's case, manually wheeling herself down the sidewalk. Unsurprisingly, she did not secure her Social Security benefits that day due to long wait times at these government agencies. What? That never happens. And needing to return to TRAC in time for dinner at 5 p.m. This is just one story I've heard working at TRAC. It's a privilege to go there twice a week and work with these people and really get to know them and what it's like to be houseless in this community when you are so isolated from resources. It's one of the reasons why I'm going to ask Mayor Brown to build low-income housing that considers how people will live connected to the city and its resources. I am just a student volunteer, and this is what I've seen in the past few months. But as a future Washington physician, we are doing all we can to address the symptoms that come with homelessness. But we're also asking our city leaders to step up and address the root causes. I hope you can join us, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Emma. Hearing that makes me angry, right? It makes me angry that we have a lot of people who are doing what they can as individuals and doing everything that they can as individuals. I think we should ask our city to step up and do what they can as a public office and to keep the deal that we made with them 5 years ago. So as Emma said, on May 2nd, we're inviting Mayor Brown to share her public commitment to following the original 1590 ordinance as written, which means putting 100% of those funds through a public and transparent process without diverting them to other purposes, and beginning to make this money available quickly, hopefully putting something out by the end of next month or during next month. And I want to reflect for a minute. So in order to make that ask, we have had to build power over the last 5 years, right? And want to reflect on what type of power that has taken. It has taken a long-term investment of our institutions showing up and holding elected officials accountable over the last 5 years. Power, in this case, depends on numbers, which means people and phone calls and money and testimony and turnout. We get accountability through a lot of counting. And it's taken institutions like Westminster and the West Central Abbey and the Unitarian congregations and the sheet metal workers and the carpenters and medical students and neighbors in West Central, right? That is broad-based organizing, is that all of us have a stake in whether this community is healthy. It's taken those organizations bringing their public values to life. It's taken individuals like Deb sharing her expertise of affordable housing development, going to a lot of meetings at City Hall. It's taken John making a lot of turnout phone calls and attending a lot of the housing equity action meetings over many, many years. It has taken, to sum it up, it has taken institutions with an appetite for change, building the power necessary to compel justice. So we're inviting you on May 2nd, and we know our work doesn't stop there. After the service today, the WestCat team is going to talk about what it would be like, both what your reactions are, how you would like to build power as a congregation, and what it would look like to do that in this immediate neighborhood, because the pressures around housing and homelessness are not that far away from the doorsteps of this congregation. And ultimately, I believe that we are working towards the world as it could be, a world where, as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, power at its best is implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel and Emma, for sharing your perspectives on that and for just kind of giving us an update of where things are at. And I hope calling many of us to action, and I hope there'll be some more information. I know you will be hearing more about that housing action that's happening on May 2nd, correct? So as Laurel said, there is a connection between love and power and justice. In our Christian churches, we should be very comfortable talking about love. God is love. We should be fairly comfortable talking about justice. Justice is what love looks like in public. But as Laurel mentioned, sometimes we're a little uncomfortable talking about power. But when we realize that power is the ability to act and best express our being, and justice is creating a world in which all people have the ability to express the fullness of their being and to act in their best interest, and we realize that justice is what love looks like in public, we realize that it is an act of love to build community and to build power in community. And so thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for all of you for continuing to contribute to that vision of love and power and justice together in community. I want to invite you now to, as we turn towards our response hymn, Take My Gifts, just a reminder that we all have a variety of gifts that we bring to this work, and we offer them all to the greater